Well, it's January the 5th, I think. It's pretty chilly outside. Right now, it's about 24 degrees, and it's afternoon. I think the high for today is like 27. It was about 10 degrees when I woke up. And today we've got a job out here in Calhoun, Tennessee. We're going to be milling up some pretty decently sized pine trees. We're going to turn it into barn siding for this guy's barn that he's building to house his tractor and everything. And I'll show you the logs here in a second. Most of them have been down for a while. I came out here and did the estimate on it in the summertime, so they've been laying on the ground for a while. And it's been so bone-chilling cold here. And when I say bone-chilling cold, I mean cold for the south. So waking up in the single digits, low teens, getting as high as 30 degrees. That's pretty cold for Tennessee. When you add in, 75% humidity and wind that just doesn't stop, the feels like temperature is a good 10-12 degrees lower than whatever the thermometer actually says. Well, it's pretty chilly out here right now. Thankfully the wind's not blowing really bad at all, but these logs are frozen as well, so that doesn't really help it. Thankfully, cutting a frozen log is no real different than cutting some of your harder hardwoods. You just have to back down on your speed a little bit. You got to keep your blade, cool, because it will heat up quite quickly. And I have noticed in the past that it's more likely to want to try to drift because it'll hit a patch of really solid material and it'll be like hitting a knot, and it'll want to try to push the blade up. So you got to make sure that you back down your speed a little bit, keep the tension on your blade right, keep that fluid moving through there, and cut through them like you would cut through hickory or some white oak, stuff like that, even on pine, on these softer woods. But here's our pile. Some fairly nice ones. I think the biggest one is about 31 inches in diameter, so we'll be able to cut that without an issue. This is a continuation of the job up in Calhoun. We're almost done with it. It's taken 2.5 weeks, I think, at this point, because last week it was raining and snowing all week long, and the temperatures were down in the low teens, single digits. Everything was frozen. Trying to get in and out of here would have been a disaster. The logs are frozen, so they're cutting really slow. But people talk all the time about, walnut being a beautiful wood, which it is, and I love it. Oak and your hardwoods having the most character and being the most pleasant to look at. But there are a lot of times when I come out here to some of these jobs and it's a bunch of pine logs and we start plowing into them and we start getting boards like these. And I think these are absolutely gorgeous. I think it's just beautiful. And I know I've posted before about pine, some of my own stock, but these are gorgeous. And we've got a pretty healthy stack sitting here that are 11 and 12 feet long. And it's, I think, 8 feet wide in the stack there. And then over there we've got 6 and 7 footers, and that's another stack that's almost 8 feet wide as well, or right at 8 feet. And he's got some really wide boards down there. We were able to cut some that were really 23 inches wide, and it's all going to be barn siding, but it's going to be some really, really good looking barn siding. And if he treats it with something before it starts to change color because of the sun, then it'll maintain these colors for a while at least. I mean, as a book matched pair of boards, that looks amazing. That's just, actually, come to think of it, looking at it, it looks like a human skeleton. You can see the chest up there, or the abdomen. You see the hips there, the pelvis area, the two femurs that come down to a pair of knees. That's pretty cool. I like that. That's pretty awesome. I've not gotten a book match pair to do that before. I almost want to buy those from him just to use them for something. So we're gonna keep cutting. It's gonna be almost 50 degrees today, but it's partly cloudy and it's fairly muddy back here. We got a nice big pile of scrap that they're gonna burn up. And for some reason, even though we have a lot more video, some of it's very choppy and a lot of the audio didn't capture, which I've had this problem before with my phone when we're recording a lot of video. For short spurts, works great. But when you want to record 30, 40, 50 minutes of video, the phone overheats and it stops recording and you start losing audio and video, etc. So we're finishing up the job. There's only a few logs left. One of the problems that we had with several of these logs is apparently the way they dropped these trees, you know, they dropped them as one big tree by pushing over the root ball and just letting it fall. And what ended up happening is a lot of these upper sections of this tree hit and flexed and burst the maybe first 2 inches or so from the bark into the tree. And that's a problem because there are several inches of board that we have to cut off that is not necessarily usable. We did chop several of them into small sections, and you know, had some like 4-footers that, you know, we stacked for the customer. It's not what he wanted, but it's better than scrapping the wood entirely. So we're cutting into these things, and one of the things I noticed after watching the video was just how much the debarker was causing some of this bark to just explode. My cameraman Darby, he was telling me that at one point in time he was watching, see the explosion there, he was watching and a piece of bark came shooting off, and it came off with enough velocity that it ricocheted off the saw head and went past the lumber stacks and over into that neighbor's yard. And he said he was pretty surprised by that. I didn't even see it happen. But see, this one is basically useless because of that split there in the middle. And there's some pretty big spike holes that were in there. I'm not sure if someone climbed the tree at some point in time and had hammered spikes in, if there was a deer stand or something like that up there, but these were some relatively big spikes. They were like 1.5 by 1.5, and they were down in there 2 or 3 inches deep. So I'm not entirely sure, and they were square. They're not round, they were square holes. So that was interesting, but I've seen them before, and they're usually like spikes for climbing into deer stands, stuff like that. You know, we keep cutting this log. We did end up hitting something. I think it was actually a piece of gravel that the debarker missed or something like that, and it took some teeth out on the blade. I'm going to do a blade change here in a couple of minutes. So we ended up cutting just about I think 2,600 board feet of material for this customer. Unfortunately, everything was 1 inch thick. So yes, even though you cut 2,600 board feet, it's the same amount of cuts that you would do for 5,200 board feet, because it's all 1 inch thick instead of 2 inches thick. So the amount of time that it takes to actually cut that is drastically different. drastically higher. You could see here in the video, I made a mistake when I put the log on there, and I've got the log turner stuck underneath the log, so I have to use the hydraulic clamp to actually lift the log and free the turner. I finally get it where it needs to be so I can go ahead and continue cutting. The nice thing about this system, the LT35 hydraulic, is your side supports are hydraulic, your toe boards are hydraulic, your clamping is hydraulic, and your turning is hydraulic. And in combination with one another, you can manipulate a log just about any way you want to the extent of where I did something very, very stupid one time, and I used the clamp piston to raise the log up and balance the log on that piston while I rotated it end for end. I shouldn't have done that. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It could have gone very, very, very wrong, but it was one of those instances where the customer was with me. They were asking a lot of questions and why I was doing things, and they had watched a couple of YouTube videos, and in the YouTube videos they had watched, you should really, cut from the big end to the little end and not from the little end to the big end. And there was this just big debate, and I just finally got to a point where I said, fine, whatever, I don't know what I'm talking about, I just do this professionally. And I spun the log around just to make the guy happy, so he'd just leave me alone. And that happens sometimes. It's just like any other industry. You have great customers, and you have customers that drive you absolutely berserk. So checking the log for blade drift, for any metal, that kind of stuff. I'm always keeping an eye out when I cut. Sometimes I'll leave 4 or 5 boards on top of the cant and continue cutting and then take them off all at once. Other times I will pull them off randomly just to check for like iron oxide stains and things like that. It's always better to keep an eye out and not hit metal because you're paying attention to what you're doing than it is to hit a piece of metal and then have to charge your customer a blade fee and wait to get a new blade. So, pull stuff off, take a look, keep an eye out for iron oxide marks, things like that. Here in a second I'm going to do a blade change, and you can see how quickly a blade change goes with these Wood-Mizers. It only doesn't even really take a couple of minutes if you just actually do it. But we were talking, conversing back and forth a little bit.
If you like these videos and you want to stay up to date with us, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. You can also visit us at vikingblooded.com and facebook.com/vikingblooded and patreon.com/vikingblooded. As always, stay safe and have fun.